Welcome back. In this lesson, we're focusing on two essay types that often appear in academic writing tasks and are often confused by students. First, we'll look at compare and contrast essays and how to organize them clearly. Then we'll move to discussion essays and the difference between discussion and argument. By the end, you'll know how a strong compare and contrast essay is structured, and you'll be able to tell when a task is asking for balanced discussion instead of a defended position. That means you'll be better prepared to plan the right essay before you start writing. A compare and contrast essay asks you to examine two subjects by looking at what they share and where they differ. The goal isn't to describe each subject separately, it's to make meaningful connections that help the reader understand the relationship between them. You might compare theories, approaches, historical events, texts, or research findings, depending on your discipline. Common signal words include compare, contrast, compare, and contrast, and distinguish between. When you see language like that in a prompt, it's a strong sign that the marker expects direct comparison throughout the essay. Once you've identified the task, your next decision is structure. Most compare and contrast essays use either the block method or the point-by-point method. In the block method, you discuss everything about subject A first, then everything about subject B after that. That structure can feel simple to plan, but it also carries a risk. Your reader may feel they're reading two separate essays before the comparison finally appears. In the point-by-point method, each paragraph compares the same feature across both subjects, like theory, method, or outcome. This usually creates a tighter academic argument because comparison happens continuously, not just at the end. At university level, point-by-point is often stronger because it helps you analyze relationships directly and keeps the essay focused on comparison rather than description. Let's make this practical with a clinical psychology prompt that asks you to compare and contrast two approaches to treating depression. A strong plan would compare the approaches across shared points like their main assumptions, techniques, and evidence of effectiveness. A common mistake is to write one full section on the first approach and another full section on the second, with almost no direct links between them. If the reader has to do the comparison for you, the essay isn't really comparing, it's just placing two mini essays side by side. The stronger move is to compare both approaches within each main point so your analysis stays visible from beginning to end. Now that compare and contrast structure is clear, let's move to discussion essays, which students often confuse with argumentative writing. The difference matters because the structure, tone, and timing of your judgment all change. A discussion essay asks you to examine an issue from more than one angle before reaching a reasoned conclusion. Its purpose is balanced evaluation. You're showing that you can consider different perspectives fairly and then make a judgment based on that analysis. This doesn't mean every idea gets equal space, but it does mean the essay should seriously engage with more than one side of the issue. Common signal words include discuss the extent to which, consider both sides of, and debate. When you see those phrases, pause before writing. The task usually expects evaluation first and judgment after that. A strong discussion essay usually begins by introducing the issue clearly and showing why it matters. Next, the body explores arguments for one side and arguments against it in a balanced, organized way. As you do this, your job is to evaluate the strength of each position, not simply list points like a brainstorming exercise. In many discussion essays, the writer's final judgment is held back until the conclusion rather than announced strongly in the introduction. That delayed judgment is one of the clearest signals that you're discussing an issue instead of arguing one side from the start. This is the distinction students most often miss. An argumentative essay commits to a position early and then spends the essay defending it. A discussion essay works differently. It weighs competing views first, then reveals the writer's final judgment after that evaluation. So, in an argumentative essay, the introduction usually signals your stance quite clearly. In a discussion essay, the introduction frames the issue and prepares the reader for balanced analysis instead of a strong early commitment. Both essay types can include evaluation, but they are not aiming for the same rhetorical effect. An argumentative essay persuades the reader to accept your position. A discussion essay shows that you've weighed the issue responsibly before judging it. If you're unsure which type you're writing, ask yourself one question. Am I defending a position from the start, or am I evaluating both sides before deciding? Now consider a health science prompt asking whether public health campaigns are the most effective way to reduce lifestyle-related disease. A discussion response would explore reasons in favor, reasons against, and the limits of each position before deciding how far the claim is convincing. One common mistake is taking a strong side in the introduction and turning the essay into an argument too early. The other mistake is staying neutral all the way through and never telling the reader what conclusion you've reached. A strong discussion essay balances both sides seriously, then ends with a clear judgment that grows naturally from the analysis. To wrap up, remember the two big ideas from this lesson. Compare and contrast essays need direct comparison throughout, and discussion essays delay final judgment until the conclusion. If an essay commits early and defends that position, you're in argumentative territory. If it weighs both sides first and judges at the end, it's a discussion essay. Use the Essay Types Guide and today's slides to review these patterns and practice spotting the signal words and structures. In the next lesson, we'll look at critical review and narrative essays, so you'll keep building a wider toolkit for academic writing. For now, focus on recognizing what the question is really asking before you start planning your response.